Welcome, everyone out there in the Betaverse, to today's version of BetaCodex Live. With me, I'm Ryan Erickson. I'm doing community organizing and just general engagement for all things beta at this point in time. And I am so pleased to welcome the originator, one of the originators of the BetaCodex and the BetaCodex network, my friend and yours, Mr. Niels Flagging. So, yes. Well, now I'm going to try to get us both on the screen at the same time. That would be nice. Here we are. So, Niels, hello.
Hi, Ryan. This is the first edition of this format, I think. Fourth edition. Yes.
Fourth. Yes, this is the fourth edition of the format. And we are learning every time as we go, I think.
Yes.
Well, no, I don't think I know we're learning. The one thing that's new today is we are testing the watch party concept. So in Zoom, we're also sharing the screen, live stream with video, that anyone who might want to join could go to www.betacodex.org/live and join a live Zoom call where this video will be shared. You'll be able to talk with your beta buddies and have a juicy conversation for while we're streaming or during that time. And at the end, Niels and I will take a breath, check out of this on Restream, and go over to Zoom. And again, for those of you who want to just kind of comment on your own, you can do that on YouTube and the BetaCodex Network channel as well. My channel, Riffing with Ryan. Niels, I think you are probably sharing it on your channel as well. Your YouTube channel, maybe? Yes? So YouTube all over the place. My Twitter sounds like Ryan, and what else? And of course the LinkedIn page here on the BetaCodex Network. So all that housekeeping out of the way, we are talking today about performance. And might I say that when I think about performance, when I have thought about it, thinking about goals and metrics and what's wrong with goals. We titled this "Overcoming the Tyranny of Fixed Targets" and bringing democracy to the ways of working and managing that. Well, and what is a fixed target anyway? Is that the same as a goal? How do we? I only know the goal language. Can you say a little bit about why we say it's fixed targets and why is it tyranny?
Yes. Can I start with tyranny?
Go for it.
Because there is this, the reason we picked this word for the title of this session is also, I think, that there is a great book about tyranny by an American, Timothy Snyder, who wrote a beautiful little book about, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, about how it's basically about democracy, really, and the opposite of it, which is tyranny. And I think that book, I recommend everybody to read it. Timothy Snyder, powerful writer, author from the United States, and of course, organizations create this kind of tyranny internally around targets and performance systems, and that's what's the focus of our session. And I think this tyranny has a long history. I mean, in organizations, by the way, this makes me think again of America. It's well documented that slave holders were some of the first organizers of, bookkeeping and accounting of, personnel and performance and so on. And of course that's a sort of tyranny, and that went straight into management by objectives, which became popularized, I think, in the 1960s and 70s, and then that went. What came afterwards in the history of organizational or corporate tyranny, there was management by objectives. Then came the strategy movement, starting in the 1970s. Now we have other methods like OKR that continue and perpetuate this kind of tyranny, or we have canvases and scorecards and key performance indicators and corporate performance systems and so on. So this kind of tyrannical measuring people, managing things, managing performance to death, so to speak, Managing motivation out of the organizations has a long history in corporations, and it's alive and kicking, sadly.
And I'm thinking managing performance against a goal in the future. Right. So we're going to say that this is the goal, that $1 million sales revenue is this, and you're going to reach that goal. Even though I can't predict the future, you can't predict the future. Nobody can predict the future. So we're just going to arbitrarily put something out there and say, chase it, and chase it well. And if you chase it really well, we'll give you a bonus. We'll give you some
Yes.
extra cash.
Yes.
And we have in Western culture in general, I think global work culture, we've accepted that that's just the way it is. Well, what other way could there be? And so this it comes to me. Well, okay, so this is a fixed target, and that invites the concept of, well, a goal is a fixed target. That's let's just have that language. I think we'll think a goal is a fixed target. Well, what is the alternative? And that relative to, if it's not fixed, it's relative.
Yes, it's important to distinguish the two. Or only if we use the term relative targets, we have an alternative to fixed targets, right? Because fixed targets seems to be the only thing that's out there. Pay for performance and merit systems and merit pay and incentive and bonus systems, they are all full of fixed targets. Budgeting, of course, strategy, key performance indicator systems, they are all full of fixed targets, right? So in order to describe the alternative, we need a word, and the word that we think is feasible and worthwhile is relative targets. Because according to Albert Einstein, everything is relative, in fact, right? But
I was going to say relative to what? What is, if fixed targets we're shooting for something, and relative targets is relative to
shooting for something is a nice way. You're American, so it sounds fitting that you use this kind of expression.
Aspiring for a future result. How about that? So I'll be more
fixed targets mean shooting at people, basically, right? Yeah, I mean, we want to control them. We want to force them. We want to bribe them. And when you talked about fixed targets and the history, when you just explained a little bit about it, I was reminded that one of the first and most articulate foes of fixed targets and fighting against fixed targets, one of the first people to do that systematically was certainly W. Edwards Deming, who said something like, if you give people a fixed target and force them to achieve it, they will do so even if they have to break the company for it. And of course, since then, many people have warned against the tyranny of fixed targets, but still, in most tools and performance systems, in most corporations, I recently did a keynote at a company that was just introducing a performance system like that, of tyranny. And interestingly, I spoke against the tyranny, but they had just launched this kind of performance tracking system. Really,
you spend $100 million, and of course, well, you're just harming all of your employees. How do you like that?
Yes, I call this.
I imagine that might not have gone over very well, or did it?
Those tools and approaches, I like to call them weapons of motivational mass destruction. Yes, it's like Oppenheimer for corporate performance systems, all over again. I mean, people. Edwards Deming said this beautiful thing. I mean, sorry for mentioning Edwards Deming all the time, because I just this year I went deep. Yes.
Yes,
you can show them.
You wrote a book on Deming.
Yes,
yeah. So
and of course, for me, this book was also an opportunity to get into Deming's work more profoundly than I had ever researched him and his work. So, and one of the weapons of motivational mass destruction, he always made it clear also that, well, first, these targets work only in the sense that they force people to make the numbers, and they create this numbers game in organization that most companies have gotten used to, the numbers game that they do, the negotiation game, and then the faking to achieve the targets, or faking, making the target at any cost. all this has become very commonplace in organizations. I mean, in America, I think the language of that is so dominant, talking about merit systems, pay for performance, as if it were the only thing that exists. And Deming, he criticized, or he kind of put it like this: in the Western world, we are used to this kind of tyranny. In Asian countries like Japan, which he was very knowledgeable about, of course, this kind of internal competition was frowned upon. Yes.
A
And
competition between individuals.
yes, because these target systems, they all create competition between individuals. For example, we will only give a bonus to 20% of the people, and we will punish 20% of the people. The Jack Welch way of performance, driving performance. That's one of the typical words as well. Driving to drive performance, and this punishment. And I mean, of course, every incentive is also a punishment. For giving an incentive to some is a punishment to others. The bribes, the gold medals, as Deming called this. And of course, Deming also criticized that in many countries like America, but also in England, for example, there is this, we are actually getting our children used to this kind of incentivization and prizes and gold medals and stars
and status, and you have to do well on your tests
and winning against others and so on.
And there's this is the idea of scarcity, and that I got to get mine at all costs.
Yeah.
And now there are a couple of things that you also mentioned in there about driving performance. Reminded me of a little book called Drive by Daniel Pink. That again, and the bottom line of that is about intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. Yes. And I think that's really what we're talking about here. There's a lot of gab in the communities, in many communities, about we want to create this environment, these conditions for intrinsic motivation to emerge, but there's no structure or real actual way or an accepted way of how do you make that? How do you create this intrinsic motivation and this drive if you have this whole carrot and stick thing going on? And this comes, so drive, intrinsic motivation also brings me back to Douglas McGregor and the idea of if your mindset is that people need to have this carrot out there and have to have it dangled because people just won't work. People are lazy. People and that's your view of the world, then of course it makes sense to put a little carrot out there for them to act like a donkey and chew at. But
yes,
and then what's the real thing? People get good at incentives. Well, then what are they supposed to do? What is the BetaCodex offering as the alternative that's more democratic and more that actually creates intrinsic motivation and creates the condition for that,
which actually liberates intrinsic motivation. It doesn't create intrinsic motivation, but it creates conditions where intrinsic motivation can flourish at work.
Yeah,
which extrinsic of an we have to imagine extrinsic motivation as something that suppresses intrinsic motivation. It's really a counterforce. So if you bribe your children to clean up their rooms or to do the dishes or something like that, that kills intrinsic motivation. You could also create conditions so that the intrinsic motivation can unfold. And that's what the BetaCodex offers. But what you just mentioned is also, it has this side, very important side, that behind every performance system that incentivizes, that motivates extrinsically, that forces or bribes people, and behind every fixed target, there is a philosophy of about human nature, so to speak. Yes.
Bad theories produce bad management. Is that what the part of this whole conversation
is? It's bad management theory that creates bad management practice. So behind every performance tool, there is philosophy. And I think that's very important to always remember. There is no performance system in the world that is free of a philosophy about human nature and about how performance works. And this, of course, fixed individual targets, they are based on the philosophy that competition is good, people need to be motivated or driven, that need to be people, that fear works, that tyranny works, that people just stink,
People suck.
People just suck. They just suck. Yeah. And of course, the people who suck most are managers because they have the biggest bribes, the biggest bonuses. So they are the suckiest, in a way.
Well,
If you take the logic seriously.
But the managers get paid more because why? Why do they get paid more? Do they get paid more because they have some sense of what's the magic of why are we paying the managers more? And why is it secret? Why is it a secret that what managers are paid and what the compensation structure is?
I would say, and that's interesting. You asked about what does the BetaCodex then suggest, right?
Yes.
BetaCodex does not suggest to pay managers less.
No.
We say conceptually, they could pay. You could pay them higher salaries. It's not ethically reasonable to pay them 100 times what normal
500 times what. Yeah.
Exactly. That's not really reasonable or ethical, but it's not in BetaCodex terms. One shall not be generally opposed to higher salaries for managers because, of course, there are market forces at work here that we cannot control and so on. But here's the thing: even if managers are paid 25 times another employee's salaries, that is not the problem. The problem is not the total amount of pay or salary. The problem is if you force or bribe people with incentives. So if part of the high salary is in incentives, or the same goes for workers, normal employees, so to speak, which is ridiculous to say, but I hope you get the idea. Also, you should neither incentivize salespeople nor managers nor other employees. You should never incentivize quality people because they will. By the way, when I did my first practical work in a company in Argentina, we had incentives for people to make good quality numbers, which is of course which results in bribery and faking and manipulating the numbers as well.
You put incentives out there, people will get good at hitting incentives, and
yes.
As opposed to being in this. Boy, there's so many beta principles that come in here in terms of the
By the way, beautifully explained. All of that, what you just said, is beautifully explained in that brilliant book by Alfie Kohn. His book, Punished by Rewards, from the 1990s. Beautiful, fantastic book where he explains all of this. Punished by
Alfie, Alfie Kohn, Kohn.
That's the one.
Punished by Rewards. Got it.
From New York, I think. Yes.
Yes. So this, again, I'm just picking from the 12 in terms of conditional income. That's what we're talking about. Also, is that there's participation versus.
Fundamentally, we say, and this is something that also Alfie Kohn beautifully articulated in his book, Punished by Rewards. He said, just pay people fair, pay them fairly, pay them well, pay them fairly, and then do everything so that people can forget about the money, so that they can do their work. That is the perfect pay system. Pay them well, pay them fairly, then do everything to get people's mind off the money so that they can focus on the work and are not incentivized or forced to fake things or beat the system. And that is what we at the BetaCodex think. The total salary is one thing. You might say that extreme imbalances of salaries are unethical, but that's not the biggest problem with incentives. Is not the total hate of a salary or the total amount of the salary, but that you use the money to curatize people. Like donkeys, and that is the problem. So if you have people earning high salaries, that's not a problem. Make the salary, the variable salary or the incentivized salary, make it fixed. That should be it. They should get this as a base salary, and that should be it. So take away the incentive power of reward, of pay. That's the idea.
Compensation, right?
Don't reward people because rewards are for dogs.
So this is now. What is the distinction between a reward and an award that occasionally that, because that's part of the white paper. And when we
Yes.
read through white paper 10 of the BetaCodex, this is the idea of you occasionally exceptional results
Yes.
can be awarded, but that
Yes.
maybe okay. So I was gonna theorize, but I'd like to know what you have to say about reward versus award.
Yes. I think in some occasions it's okay to award people another, something. I remember my first wife, she worked at Google, and one day she came back from work and said, "Oh, I just got an award," and she got $1,000 or so for it, and it came totally by surprise. There was kind of they had an internal vote or something about who performed exceptionally, and most people thought that she deserved it, and she said, "Oh, 2 or 3 people from the office got this." So that's okay. I think that's not an incentive, because you can occasionally surprise people with
So
something.
there's surprise, or they're intentionally running in this rat race to say, oh, I'm a
Exactly. Once you
resume
make it a
hit.
game, once you make it a frequent thing or a calculatable thing or something that can be played, then it turns sour and bad, of course, right? And of course, awarding people, why would you award people? I mean, shouldn't people feel, and this is something very Deming-y, a very lean idea. Pay people fairly, pay them well, pay them fairly. And then shouldn't the pleasure of work not come from, delighted customers, great project, interesting work? That's where the pleasure should come from. And we should, of course, this is a tough thing for in many Western cultures, especially, to think of work as being intrinsically pleasurable, potentially.
Mm,
Yeah.
the joy of
We
work.
always like to
Yeah.
think that, oh, work is dirty, work is bad, people suffer from work. Oh, and if people have to clean, I mean, whenever I have to clean something at home, I try to make it into a game in my head. Of course, it's total fake. It sucks, but the work sucks. But still, I make it into a game so that I can derive some pleasure from it. And that's how we all deal with work, which is psychologically very interesting, of course, that we all try to make the work fun for us. The problem is if you have fixed targets, intensive systems, bonus systems, if you have people driving your performance, controlling it too tightly, then you could drive out the intrinsic motivation, and you drive
Mm.
in the fear and the power
So
games.
this the fear of my bosses. I've got to do this for my boss, and then if I don't do this, I won't get my bonus, or I'm going to get docked my pay. All these kind of things around it. So this is the tyranny. This is the
Exactly.
authoritarianism of this kind of.
But of course, you asked about the
I'm this.
alternative. You asked about
Pardon
the
me.
alternative earlier. You asked about
But
the
that
alternative.
I was just getting into it. So what this is, we've talked a lot about the authoritarian aspect of it, in that
Yes.
this is coercive. What is democratic? What does democratic perform do? What do democratic performance systems look like, especially in a beta organization?
Yes, humanistic or democratic or reasonable performance systems, they do not incentivize the individual. And here's one trick: individual targets are foolishly crazy, an insane idea. Also, because in an organization, individual performance does not even exist. And this is a thing I think that very few people have truly understood it. That in an organization there is no such thing as individual performance. That's why that organization exists. Let's take a good example is a hospital, right? If a doctor, let's say a brain surgeon, to take the most extraordinary example of what stuff that happens in a hospital, brain surgery. Okay, so if the doctor, the brain surgeon, could perform by herself or himself, then the hospital wouldn't exist. But the hospital exists as an organization, because that, of course, the brain surgeon is just part of the operation table thing, and the before and after, and the taking care and preparing the patient and analyzing, diagnosing, whatever. So it's a whole machine, a whole bunch of many people interacting, 20, 30 people interacting on the patient over time, during the process, and the performance emerges in the space between people, as we like to speak. So individual performance incentivizing a doctor would be lunacy. Yes, we should never incentivize a brain surgeon for anything, because then, of course, in Germany, for example, we have this. There are strong incentives for surgeons to do surgery.
Mhm.
We have a lot more surgery in Germany, for example, than we should have, because it's very well paid. We are, but the same thing happens in America with drugs, I hear.
Yeah, naturopathic or the kind of more healthful ways of living
Yes.
are less emphasized as opposed to
But
surgical
but
solutions or pharmacological.
the fundamental insight here is individual performance does not exist. It always happens. Performance happens in the space between people in an organization. So never
Yeah.
ever set individual targets. Never try to measure individual performance, because that stuff does not exist. A salesperson doesn't sell, so to speak. Yes. No salesperson in a company ever sold something alone. Yes, there's always a web of value creation behind that person. So what do we suggest in the BetaCodex network, and what are relative targets about? To set indicators and measures just for teams, and to stop at the team level. Never use individual targets. Stop at the team level. And then do not fix a target in advance. Just set the measure and compare teams between them, or units, or regions, or offices, or branches, whatever you have. So you can compare performance of teams between them, and you can measure and track team performance over time. Team performance, not individual performance. So you can make a list of teams, but never do a list of people.
And that competition is that's not really an incentivized thing. That's
Exactly.
just that creates the competitive. I want to do better because I want to be successful. I want to serve my customer or the people I care about in this market.
So if an organization sets or uses relative targets for teams and uses league tables, it should not financially incentivize teams to reach at the top of the league table, or to reach.
So you mentioned league tables. That is a European football kind of concept of being in the league. That
I think you have it in America too.
Oh, we do, but just we don't talk about it that way. It's the standings. It's the conference and divisional standings. So, and that's I think one of the things that I hope that we can do as part of this overall the beta project is to have this universal language and this translation amongst of this cultural unity in some way.
I mean, much of the things that we talk about in these BetaCodex live sessions is language and the sloppiness of the language that we use, right? We talk about merit systems and pay for performance. That already, it carries the spirit of tyranny. And if we talk of league tables, it smells a little bit like tyranny as well, because usually in America we think that people at the top must be rewarded and people at the bottom must be punished. By the way, we have this in Germany and other countries as well, but in America it's very accentuated. This belief you must incentivize.
And because there's only this pot of dollars, and that the number one gets 20%, and then it's 10, 5, 2, 1 or whatever below that.
But that's, the idea of
nothing, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about that the competition is this healthy. I'll use the gendered term. It's this sportsmanship, and that is this almost like, I think the concept of citizenship is maybe a little bit of a bridge too far, but leaderships, citizenship, sportsmanship. This are group terms. This is not I am a leader, or I have this He-Man. I have the power.
Yes. Or put differently, the only thing that should be driven in organizations is that the tyranny of reaching and driving should be driven out. That's the only driving that should exist. We should drive out this competitiveness. And Deming wrote beautifully about this. I can only repeat and recommend his work, all his books, all his writing about this. As in the moment that you start to foster internal competition in organizations that goes beyond being able to, okay, we are performing here, how are the others performing? That's okay, right? To have people, be able to compare their performance, to have some kind of measure. That's fair.
How well am I doing? Yeah. Mhm.
Yes. How well are we doing? But you should not have then managers jumping at it and telling them that, oh, you have been bad, and
You
now
need
we
to
can
do
punish you.
better.
Yeah, that already is too much. Or incentivizing teams for performing at the top of a league table, that would be too much. Don't do that. If there is a reward, it should be utterly symbolic and unvaluable, non-valuable. Very important. Otherwise, you stifle motivation and start unhealthy competition starts to kick in. So never incentivize, only measure on the team level, never measure or set individual targets, never fix targets, never connect team targets with rewards or individual targets with rewards. All that is toxic. Yeah.
And there's
never
another
appraise people, by the way. This is also bad. How could we forget, right? Never
performance
ever appraise.
appraisals.
Should be
likes
a goner. By the way, 15 years ago, I attended a seminar by Tom Peters in Zurich, and the most fervent thing that he criticized and bashed was performance appraisal. Like, he talked for half an hour why every organization in the world should abolish and eliminate all performance appraisal. Why would you have it? It's pure tyranny. It's the worst, really, the worst practice, regardless of how well you do it. It's like slavery. It cannot be done right. Or the guillotine. You cannot use it right. The electric chair. There's no way of using it right.
We are approaching the time box that was kind of out there around a half hour or so, I think.
Yes.
So there are actual tools and principles and laws and information that we have available from betacodex.org in white paper number 10 about making performance work. A lot of this is there. Also, you have a quick start course coming up in August where we will be not a deep dive, but a dive that's quite worthy. So if you want, would you like to say a little bit about the quick start?
Yes, if I can. It's the marketing thing.
Well,
On 29th of August, I will do this 2-hour online event, like a compact workshop, high intensity workshop on relative targets. We call that Relative Targets Quick Start, and it can be booked through Eventbrite. I mean, we also sell a poster with a concept overview, and on the Red 42 website, there is a whole page with articles and so on relative targets too. So.
Yeah, so it's not a secret. You can all of this, all the rules, the laws, the principles, they are available on red42.com, and you can go and do research there, and certainly through betacodex.org. All the authors, everything we're talking about here is available for free, and that the reuse of this material is from the Creative Commons license. If that you're not prohibited from doing those things. So this is, I think, all part of. This is not really performance, but this is that what are the theories behind the BetaCodex, and why is this a more human way of working, a more democratic way of honoring human nature, and that's, who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want that?
And in the last session, we talked about complexity too, and relative targets are also the only way of designing performance systems in a way that is complexity robust, that is appropriate for the complex world.
That was I was going to say, and because we're using actuals.
Yes, that's a very good way to put it. By the way, relative performance systems only use actuals. They don't use planned numbers, which has the advantage that the data, the information you look at to judge performance, it's always real data, real information, actual numbers, usually from the accounting system. They could be from others, but usually from accounting systems and so on. So it's only actual numbers, not planned actuals, variance analysis, or comparisons to budget. All that goes out of the window. Reporting systems become much simpler. Compensations, pay systems become much simpler. You don't have to set targets annually. I mean, a company like Handelsbanken, they haven't negotiated targets for over 50 years, since 1971. No budget or target or incentive negotiations. They have run the same system for over 50 years. And that is the quality of a good performance system. That's where we got the inspiration for relative targets from, right? From cases like this.
That, and there's also, again, going back to the actual side of it, that they're your own company's actuals. You certainly have that in your accounting system, but then there's, oh well, how are we doing in the market? How are we? Don't we need to have these audacious goals, these 10x goals or whatnot? There, and there's a case for, oh, wonder, so this amazing performance, innovation is we're rewarded by innovation. That's one item of it. But the idea of relative targets external to the organization, that's another concept. I think that's very important for if you're going to go beta, if you're going to be beta, you have to be able to, you have to have the capacity to do this kind of, whether it's benchmarking or some kind of external actual to actual comparison. So
Yes.
that's
because performance on some levels in every organization can be compared internally between teams and over time. Yeah. But some performance measures can be compared externally. For example, Toyota can compare its overall profitability with other competitors and quality indicators with other competitors, external competitors. Other information like branch performance at Handelsbanken, you cannot compare a branch at Handelsbanken, the Swedish bank, with a branch of Bank of America because the conditions are different. Yeah, you can compare the overall bank's performance. Yes, and then contemplating, you must consider that, okay, the American market is different than the Swedish or European market and so on. Yeah, you can factor that in. Yeah, so some level of external comparison is good to show to the organization what's possible. That's what in relative targets you need external comparisons or benchmarks for, to show what's possible. I like to say sometimes that if you think that you are the best performing organization in your market, you probably haven't looked properly at competition and at the information that you might have. There's always somebody better out there. Yes.
Well, that's the other thing. Okay, so I have to calm myself down because you've asked me to, basically, I want to bring a Seth Godin reference in there.
Okay,
he's my guy.
Love the guy.
What is, if you're talking about, I want to be the best in the world, well, what does that mean? Well, how are you defining your world? My world is this market. And that's a real target, to be able to say, who am I in this market? Whether it's this city, country, region, however you do it. And that, I think, is also this sense of intrinsic motivation. Is that we are performing in this, we are delivering to the people we care about. And we are doing it because we are the best in our world, not the world, the globe, but our world together. So I think we probably ought to get over to the Zoom now and see if there's some real people over there who want to talk beta. Would you have any last words that you would like to share about, how's this beta? What's so beta about this?
Oh my God, I felt that we only touched the surface of this topic, but yeah, there's more to come. And people are invited to look at the material on the relative targets concept page on red42.com and in the BetaCodex network white paper number 10, making performance work. So take a look at it. Those papers and materials, and also the books that we recommend on BetaCodex.org. Helpful resources to learn more about all this.
Well, there we go. Do we want to jam a little bit on what we do next week? Well, we know what's happening next week.
Yes,
that's right. Next week is the big event where we do the 5-year celebration of Open Space Beta with actually doing this in the world with Niels, you and I, as well as Silke Herman, who is critical to the Open Space Beta revolution, and the progenitor of all this stuff, Daniel Mezek, who was a great mentor of mine personally, and I know you have a great relationship with him as well. So that'll be a great conversation next week.
2nd of June, we will celebrate 5 years of Open Space Beta together with Daniel Mezek and Silke Herman. So we will have a party. of
Indeed.
sorts. And on that occasion, we will have everybody together in a call as well, for this
Yes.
conversation, which will take a little bit longer as well. The session will take a little bit longer. We will look at the past, the present, and the future of very fast organizational transformation.
Yes.
That will be fun. And now, let's see if anybody joins us in the after party.
Let's see. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm thrilled that we are continuing to do this, and I am personally enthused and delighted by what we are doing here on the BetaCodex network. Be more beta.